Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Good morning, I'm Karl Fitzpatrick and welcome to Business Matters. While solar technologies are becoming increasingly popular with building owners here in Ireland. But what are the payback periods and what more can the government do to incentivise the use of renewable energy technologies? Paul Browne from SolarStream joins us now to answer these very questions. Paul, we'll be discussing the success which you've enjoyed with SolarStream. But why did you first decide to enter the world of solar?
Good morning, Carl. Pleasure to be on. I suppose, Carl, it first came to my attention when I was working in Northern Ireland, just outside Newry, and I could see the uptake in the Northern Irish market of solar. I suppose was supported by an incentive at the time that got people focused on it and made people find out a bit more on it. And what it attracted me, I was involved in business up there, and we had an approach by somebody that wanted to put solar on our roofs up there, and that we could actually put up a panel that was passive, that was green, clean. There was no moving parts on it, and it essentially could produce power for us and reduce up to 30-40% of our electricity bill. And I suppose that's what attracted me into it, Carl, initially. And then I suppose roll on the clock about 2 years later, and I set up SolarStream in Ireland there late 2017, early 2018, to offer that same sort of service that was available in the UK to Irish consumers.
Now, I do want to talk to you specifically about solar on this morning's interview, and both on the residential and on the commercial side. But I think there is lots of confusion, Paul, in this market still in relation to what solar is and what it does, because of course you have two different types of technology.
Yeah, I suppose what you would have had traditionally Carl, was the solar thermal, and thermal being sort of heat or hot water. And that's what the Irish consumer would have known for the last 10 or 15 years, the circular tubes that you would have seen on people's homes, now indeed the flat tubes. And what they essentially did is they gave the homeowner hot water, primarily from April through to the end of September, October. Now, PV solar is slightly different. What PV does, Carl, is it uses the light. And it essentially takes the light, not necessarily the sunshine, but it converts that light into electricity. So what PV solar does, which is our systems, is for the homeowner, they give the homeowner electricity first and foremost. But we use smart technology with that as well. So what we do is we provide the homeowner electricity during the day. We put in a battery so the homeowner then has electricity to use at night when they come home in the evening. And indeed, in the event of a power cut, they have their own backup power supply in the battery. And what we also provide is we provide a smart switch that once the battery is full and once the homeowner is using as much electricity as they can in the home, it converts the rest of the electricity into hot water. So I suppose the PV solar really is sort of a technological advancement of what we would have had traditionally in solar thermal, but being a sort of giving a complete solution with daytime electricity, nighttime electricity and hot water.
Now, there's been lots of myths surrounding solar over the years here in Ireland. One of the core myths, I suppose, being that how can solar energy work in Ireland? We have a very overcast climate. It makes sense for the Mediterranean, but maybe not for Ireland. How would you respond to that?
Well, I suppose, Carl, essentially what PV solar does is it takes light, and the easiest way to explain it, and I've explained to our customers this way, is we produce a solar calculator that people use in school, and there's no sunshine light, there's just the light in the class schoolroom, and that produces power for the calculator. So essentially, PV solar operates on the same basis. It takes the light around us. Now, whilst we have less light than you have down in the equator or in the Mediterranean, we still have 70% of the same solar climate that the Mediterranean gets. So, we're going to get 70% of what the production is if you had a house down in the south of France. So how we overcome that is we simply put up an extra couple of panels here. So for every 1 metre square of panels we can put on a homeowner's roof, we're essentially creating the equivalent of 120 litres of oil as an offset. And that's how powerful PV solar is. So look, it works the whole way from the equator right to the North Pole, not necessarily as strong at different levels of latitude and longitude, but still effective and still producing power.
And what about planning permission? Is planning permission required to put solar panels on a roof?
Planning is required if you want to go to a certain size, Carl, but there's an exemption here of 7 panels. So the homeowner can put in 7 panels straight away. And that's under the 2007 legislation that was brought in by Dick Roach, who was Minister for the Environment. And I suppose that's an outdated piece of legislation. So I think what you have the legislators now trying to struggle to keep up with the pace that democratisation is taking place at. There's a complete pull by homeowners and business consumers to put solar on the roof. So the legislation is trying to play catch-up with it. So we are expecting an announcement on legislation. It was due to happen for the end of this year. We're told it will happen here in 2020. And that should bring up the planning exemption that would permit people to put up solar to whatever level they choose. And for comparison, Karl, if you go up the road about an hour and a half up to Northern Ireland, the exemption there is up to 250 kilowatts, or the equivalent of 700 panels on any one roof. So you can see that's the level of scale or flexibility we need to create for business owners and for homeowners here in Ireland, that they can actually do something positive for the environment and reduce their carbon footprint and not cause any carbon offsets. I think we need to encourage, as an electorate, we need to encourage government to sort of speed up and catch up with the legislation to allow this to happen.
Now, one thing that the government is doing for residential is it's providing a grant of up to €3,800 through Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland for homeowners that are investing in solar PV systems. How does that work, and what is the eligibility criteria, Paul?
Yes, look, it was a very good pilot programme, Karl, when it kicked off in October 2018. It was introduced to create a pilot programme where up to 1,000 or 2,000 homeowners could avail of a grant of up to 3,800 and install solar on their roof. It's given the appropriate incentive to kickstart the market, and it's made consumers aware of it, but it's probably inadequate for what we need to do in terms of rolling out the scale of PV solar that's needed in Ireland. It will allow for 1,000 to 2,000 systems to be installed, but our own prediction on that is the actual annual budget will be spent by about June of next year. So essentially I think the government needs to just give more of an incentive to encourage homeowners to put it up, and that mightn't necessarily be the grant. It could be an offset against their electricity bills for the carbon credit that they have to pay on that, or the carbon tax that they have to pay on it, or it could be some form of a tax incentive that we would see in other jurisdictions where people can write off the cost of their system against income tax. And, it's essentially a tax offset, but a lot of that tax is recovered through employment created in the industry, through VAT payable in the industry, and through extra employment created in the industry, because it's a highly intensive industry, and there's a real bang for the buck in terms of government support or incentive on it. So I suppose what's there is welcome, Karl, but it seems insufficient for what's needed in the years ahead to encourage serious uptake in the space by homeowners.
And I know that the solar industry itself has been waiting a long time for the government to make an announcement in relation to how it's going to support and incentivise commercial installations. There's been lots of talk about a feed-in tariff or even a once-off subsidy. Is there any developments in recent times regarding that, Paul?
Not really, Karl. And I think the confusion around that and the anticipation of an announcement has caused inertia in the market. People are nearly afraid to move on the basis that if they move, they'll miss out. They'll miss out on support. But the reality is that businesses can make genuine savings by installing solar under a couple of models. And that's essentially, rather than incurring the capital costs themselves, if they come to an organisation like ourselves, where we can actually incur the capital cost up front and allow businesses to install solar and essentially use the savings that they're achieving the first 7 or 8 years to pay it off. Now, if there was some government incentive, we might actually be able to, get a payback period for businesses of 5 years. But, it stands on its own 2 feet at the moment now with a 7-year payback, an environment where organisations like our own can provide the capital costs, can monitor and oversee the operation of the system for that period, and the homeowner owns the capital asset at the end of 7 years. Now, bear in mind, Karl, that might seem long compared to some goods, but it's like telling a business or a homeowner that they can clear their mortgage in 7 years rather than paying rent. It's the same model. We'll put it up, we'll rent it to you, and that rent essentially pays off the capital cost over a short period. So I would say to you, Karl, there's incentives there, and there are opportunities for those that want to first move, or we can wait and see what might ultimately come from the government. And generally, as I suppose with a lot of these incentives, it tends to be very little, and it tends to be quite restrictive when it does come.
And Paul, how are companies like your own financing the upfront costs of the equipment and the installation?
Well, I suppose the traditional market, Karl, just for solar isn't really there. The traditional associated banks don't really understand it. At this stage, they probably have an understanding of wind, etc., of large-scale commercial wind. But the concept of large-scale democratization by people putting up solar themselves isn't fully understood. So somebody in a home waiting to or looking to put up solar has to go to their bank or their credit union and explain what PV solar is. So I think there's a need for the traditional lenders to get education in the space, and there's probably a niche for a specialised lender in this space. And I suppose because we're in the space, we've created our own little niche where we raise money every year. We raise it from private investors here in Ireland. They provide us with a fund every year, and we use that fund to go out and install our solar and allow homeowners or businesses to pay us back out of their savings and create the return then for the investors who have faith in us and put the monies in. This model would have been quite developed in Northern Ireland where we previously installed. And it gave us possibly a strategy that we've implemented here, and heretofore has been quite successful. We have our own funding to allow us to put in 200 or 300 systems a year, and the uptake is just about that at the moment. So we're hoping, Karl, that as we roll out and prove the business model, that more traditional funders might get behind us and start financing us and others in this area.
Now, Paul, two of the main considerations that anybody will have in terms of making a decision to invest in solar or not will be the payback period, which you've addressed at 7 years, and then secondly in relation to the quality of the product itself. Now, there has been some issues in the Irish market with products that might be of inferior quality in some respects. What are your thoughts on that, and what advice have you got for listeners this morning in relation to how to assess the quality of a product?
Well, what I would say to you at the outset, Karl, is I suppose I would be supportive of the Chinese market in that if we look at our phones, be it a Samsung Galaxy or an iPhone, they're manufactured in China. China has become the centre of excellence for manufacturing to take Western intellectual know-how and property and do it at an exceptionally good manufacturing standard. And the same is true in the solar space. Not only that, but China itself accounts for 70% of all solar installation globally, and that's not something we realise here. We assume it's some sort of an outreach manufacturing facility, but they consume 70% of all solar panels that they produce. So I've been out there, and they are a centre of excellence, and we tend to buy from them. But how the whole thing is I suppose, accredited and standards are ensured is that there are two levels of panels. There are those that are essentially Tier 1 panels that are approved by Bloomberg Finance in the USA, and that's what we install, and that's what we would encourage businesses and homeowners to focus on, as you said, rather than possibly the broader, more spurious market that might be coming from the eastern sector, is to very much in shopping and choosing what they purchase to look for the Tier 1 Bloomberg standard as part of what they install.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Paul Browne from SolarStream, and I would like to thank Paul for joining us on this morning's programme and for providing us with an insight into the current solar market here in Ireland.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.